What if saving 5 lives could still make you a killer? A runaway trolley is racing down a track at 60 miles an hour. Ahead, 5 workers are trapped. Your brakes are dead. They're seconds away from dying. But there's one escape. One side track. One man standing on it. If you pull the lever, the 5 survive, but the one dies instead. Most people pull the lever. Sounds simple, right? But here's the strange part. The moment the situation changes slightly, almost everyone changes their mind. Now imagine you're not driving the trolley. You're standing on a bridge above the tracks. The same 5 workers are about to die. But next to you is a large man leaning over the rail. If you push him onto the tracks, his body stops the trolley. He dies. The 5 survive. Would you do it? Almost nobody would. And that's where everything breaks. Because a second ago, sacrificing one person to save 5 felt completely logical. Now it suddenly feels evil. Why? That question shattered classrooms, philosophers, and even legal systems for centuries. Because hidden inside this impossible scenario is something terrifying. Your morality might be inconsistent. And this is where it gets weird. People defend the first choice using pure math. 5 lives are worth more than one. But the second choice feels personal, direct, violent. Suddenly the numbers don't matter anymore. So what changed? Was it intention? Physical action? Emotion? Or are humans secretly making moral decisions based on instinct instead of logic? Then the experiment becomes even darker. Imagine you're a doctor in an emergency room. 5 patients need treatment. One patient is dying. If you save the one, the 5 die? Most people sacrifice the one to save the 5. But then comes the twist nobody expects. You're now a transplant surgeon. 5 dying patients each need an organ. One healthy man is sleeping in the next room. His organs could save all 5 instantly. Would you kill him? Almost nobody says yes. Same numbers. Same logic. Completely different answer. And that's when things changed. Because suddenly morality stops looking like a set of rules and starts looking like a psychological illusion. Some people argued outcomes are everything. Save the most lives possible. Others insisted certain actions are simply wrong no matter what happens afterward. Kill is kill. Murder is murder. Even if 5 people survive because of it. But that's not even the craziest part. The deeper philosophers looked into these dilemmas, the more disturbing the conclusion became. Human beings don't actually agree on why something is right or wrong. They only agree after the fact. And once you realize that, every moral decision starts feeling unstable. Then came the real story that turned this thought experiment into a nightmare. In 1884, a ship called the Mignonette sank in the middle of the South Atlantic. 4 survivors escaped onto a tiny lifeboat. No food, no water, no rescue in sight. Days passed, then weeks. The youngest survivor was a 17-year-old cabin boy named Richard Parker. Starving and delirious, he drank seawater. Soon he collapsed at the bottom of the boat, barely alive. And this is where it gets disturbing. The captain made a proposal. Kill one person so the others could survive. No lottery, no agreement, no consent, just a decision. The captain took out a knife, whispered a prayer, and slit the boy's throat. The survivors drank his blood, ate his body. 4 days later, they were rescued. True story. And when they returned home, the entire country split apart over one impossible question. Were they monsters, or were they justified? Some people defended them instantly. They argued survival changes everything. After 19 days without food, morality becomes meaningless. The choice was simple: one dies, or everyone dies. But others were horrified. Because if survival excuses murder, where does it stop? And that's where the debate exploded. Some argued the real problem wasn't the killing. It was the lack of fairness. If the crew had drawn lots, would it have been acceptable? If the boy had agreed to sacrifice himself, would that change things? Shockingly, many people said yes. Suddenly consent became more important than death itself. But here's the strange part. Even when people accepted the idea of a fair sacrifice, something still felt deeply wrong. Why? Because deep down, most humans believe some actions should never happen. Ever. No matter the outcome. And that creates a terrifying contradiction. If morality is based on consequences, then sacrificing one to save many should always be acceptable. But if morality is based on absolute rules, then even saving lives can become immoral. So which one is true? That question led directly into one of the biggest philosophical wars in history. On one side was Jeremy Bentham, The man who argued morality is simple math. Maximize happiness. Reduce suffering. The greatest good for the greatest number. Sounds reasonable until you realize what it allows. Because under pure utilitarian logic, sacrificing innocent people can become morally correct if enough people benefit. And suddenly, the trolley problem isn't about trains anymore. It's about governments, wars, laws, punishment, free speech, human rights, even history's darkest atrocities. What happens next changes everything. Because another philosopher stepped in and rejected the entire system completely. Immanuel Kant believed morality should never depend on outcomes. Ever. According to Kant, human beings are not tools, not numbers, not statistics in an equation. You cannot use a person as a means to an end, even if the result looks beneficial. That idea sounds noble, until reality gets involved. Because real life forces impossible choices constantly. And this is where things get terrifying. Every society secretly switches between both systems depending on the situation. In war, sacrificing civilians becomes necessary. In hospitals, doctors prioritize patients with better survival chances. Governments calculate acceptable losses during crises. Even you do it. Every day, you just don't notice it. But once you see the contradiction, you can't unsee it. That was the real purpose behind these famous moral experiments. Not to find perfect answers, but to expose something hidden inside the human mind. Morality might not be stable at all. It might be emotional improvisation disguised as certainty. And that realization unsettled generations of students because it triggered a dangerous question. If our moral instincts can flip so easily, how do we know any belief is truly right? That's why philosophy became so controversial. Not because it gives answers, but because it destroys the comfort of thinking you already had them. Socrates was hated for this exact reason. He forced people to question assumptions they never wanted challenged. And once doubt enters your mind, it spreads everywhere. Politics, religion, justice, identity, freedom, nothing stays untouched. But here's the strangest part of all. Even people who claim morality is personal opinion still live as if certain things are objectively wrong. Betrayal, murder, torture, cruelty. So skepticism fails too. Because no matter how uncertain morality becomes, humans are still forced to make choices every single day. And every choice reveals what we truly believe, even when we can't explain why. That's why these thought experiments survive for centuries. They aren't really about trolleys, doctors, or shipwrecks. They're about you. About the hidden rules controlling your decisions without permission. About the terrifying possibility that your strongest moral convictions could collapse under one small change in perspective. And maybe the scariest part is this. If morality changes depending on circumstance, then what would happen if you were pushed far enough? Would you pull the lever? Would you push the man? Would you sacrifice one life to save many? Or would you discover something darker about yourself instead? Because when survival, fear, and desperation collide, nobody truly knows who they are until the moment they have to choose.